want to read beginning at verse 8 of Revelation chapter 2. To the angel of the church in Smyrna, write the words of the first and the last, who died and came to life. I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich. And the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you in prison, that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death. I will give you the crown of life. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who conquers will not be hurt by the second death. If you believe this is the word of God, say amen. You may be seated. You may be seated. If the stage behind me is the country of Turkey, you draw a line directly across the center. Ephesus is going to be on the far west coast, about halfway between the bottom of the stage and the middle of that, right down the center of that line that you drew, right on the western coast. Smyrna is a town just north of Ephesus, also a coastal town. Both cities were in the running for what was being nicknamed as the first city of Asia. Caesar wanted to make sure that all of the Roman Empire was not only conquered, but it was ruled, it was governed. And one of the things that is really fascinating for us to know is that as we read the New Testament and we gain our understanding, our attitudes about Rome and the way that they oppressed the Jews, we have to understand that we may feel some kind of way about the Romans, but back in the day, the Romans were kind of cool. I mean, they're the ones that brought order to chaos. Rome took all of these distant cities, disconnected cities, and built roads, built passageways from city to city to increase trade. Rome was kind of like, you know what? We're going to get rich, and everybody, if you stick with us, you'll get rich too. And that was kind of the feeling about Rome from the citizens of Rome. You know, that's what they said publicly anyway. And what you have to understand is that all of this was made possible by a 3-foot sword. They made sure that chaos was not going to be tolerated. And so today, we're going to be spending a little bit of time in a letter written to a very prominent, a beautiful, a coastal, a wealthy city called Smyrna. As a matter of fact, the name Smyrna, it derives from their greatest export, myrrh. And so those from the east came to the babe, the newborn king. The Bible says in the gospel according to Matthew, and they presented this king with gifts of gold and frankincense and Smyrna. Like what I did just there? Smyrna was known as the city in which you could go and worship the very first temple that was ever built to worship Lord Caesar. At this time, there are all a bunch of different gods. Greek gods, Roman gods, but Domitian Caesar insisted that he be acknowledged as a god. He was Lord. And so because of this, the decree went out that it was no longer an option, it was compulsory. It was required by law that if you lived in the Roman Empire, you were to worship Caesar. You were to burn incense to Caesar. Take a pinch, incense, go into the temple, burn this incense to Lord Caesar, and you'd actually get a certificate saying that you have officially worshiped and honored Caesar this year. It's kind of like a vaccination card. You get it re-stamped the next year. Now, if you went into the city, the areas of commerce to do trade, to the markets, to the real estate office, to the school, to the banks, and you were a resident of Smyrna, and you didn't bring in your certificate of patronizing Lord Caesar and worshiping him, then you were shunned, ridiculed, abused. They talked about you bad. You were less than. You were not one of us. And since you're not one of us, you're not going to receive the benefits that we receive, the blessings that we receive. The kind of blessings that I'm talking about are food, clothing, and shelter. And so if you were a believer in Jesus Christ and you lived in the city of Smyrna, home of the very first temple ever built to Lord Caesar, you were living 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in hostile territory. Let me say it like this. And if I handed the microphone to Dr. Tim, he could tell you that there are folks that live in persecution as their standard way of living. It is every day, every moment, every hour. It's not something that they experience every now and then. Oh, this is just getting up in the morning. So we're going to read about believers who were living in poverty. I want you to know that it was politically based, it was religiously based, but it was a real thing. If you were a believer in Jesus Christ, it was like the whole city was against you. So the Apostle John is sitting on the Isle of Patmos. Now, I need you to recognize, perhaps even feel, by the time John, the Revelator, if you will, writes from the Isle of Patmos, Rome has taken over the world. Jesus has died. It's been many years now. And Rome has gone out of their way to find all of those who believe in Jesus, who say they follow him, that would place Jesus above Caesar. And they have methodically and strategically hunted them down. It wasn't just non-popular to be a Christian. It was bad for your health. It was bad for your family, for your finances, for your status in the community. And what was even more shocking than all of that is how the word of Christ kept growing in the hearts and minds of men and women. How Jesus Christ was never stamped out by the Romans. As a matter of fact, it kept spreading. It kept growing. It reminds me of the people of God in Goshen and how Pharaoh came along and looked over in Goshen and said, look at all them Israelites. They are having babies left and right. We got to put a stop to that. They're just growing and growing and growing and growing. Caesar looked at the people of God. Even though they methodically stamped out every single one of the original apostles of Jesus, martyred them, killed them by the sword. They saw them in half. They beheaded them. They crucified them. Can't imagine a more difficult, painful, miserable way to die. But it's Rome. So they came up with one, and they would slowly burn you at the stake. And even worse than that would be to be exiled. Let's not get Patmos in our minds like it's some glamour resort that you just get to have some me time for the next until you die. This is complete and utter isolation. Imagine this kind of weather with no shade, no shelter, no resources. If you think that they helicoptered in food and supplies every 3 months, you don't understand Patmos. They dropped you off, and when they left, they didn't even turn around to say goodbye. You were exiled. And John's crime? Well, he followed Jesus, and he preached Jesus. So I wonder what John is feeling, what he's thinking as Jesus, the risen Son of the living God, inspires him to write, and he's writing the words that are coming from Jesus about tribulation and poverty and slander. I wonder if John begins to weep while he writes. Because he can relate. He can understand. And so, if you understand a little bit about Smyrna and what it might have been like to be a Christian in Smyrna, the town where everybody had a punch card that they got their Caesar worship in for this year. And if you could understand how John was completely and utterly alone, then let's take a look at this text. We'll go through it quickly, make an application, and then I want us to spend time together around the Lord's table. Revelation chapter 2. It is important that you look at the text while we go through it. All eyes, find the text. Let's read it together. Let's read it together. Let's go through it together. This is important. Beginning at verse 8. To the angel, to the messenger, probably the pastor, the elder of the assembled Jesus followers, the church, in the city of Smyrna, the city of myrrh, that sweet-smelling, fragrant substance that a lot of perfumeries would use as an ingredient for their perfume. Write to this church the words of the first and the last who died and came to life. Those of you that have been with us in this series, or if you just know who the Lord Savior is, who are we talking about? The first and the last who died and came to life. Say it out loud. Talking about Jesus. It is Jesus who is doing the actual He's giving this message to be written. These words come from Jesus. Verse 9, I know your tribulation. I know your tribulation. Let me say it again so you get my emphasis. I know. I know. An intimate word, no. There's intimacy with this. But this particular word, know, is oida in the Greek. And it's a different word than the way that we think about knowledge. Let me try to break it down like this. You got 5 senses, right? If I tell you, Daryl, man, I heard what you're going through. I just told Daryl that I know what he's going through. I've got some knowledge about that. But isn't it interesting that if I heard it, you still can feel a little bit of separation there, right? Because when I told Daryl, I heard what you're going through, I was actually on the phone on my way to Walmart. I wasn't going to Daryl's house. This oida, think of a different sense than hearing. Think of seeing. Brother, I see what you're going through. Isn't that interesting how you change the sense and it changes the mood? What am I trying to tell you, Daryl? Man, I have empathy for you. I want to relate to you. I want to know you. That's the word that Jesus uses and tells John to write. Listen to it now. Jesus, the high priest that is walking around the 7 golden lampstands. We get this from Revelation chapter 1. Those golden lampstands are the churches. And he's relating to all of them. All he's doing is repeating that to the church in Smyrna. I can relate to you. I'm paying attention. From the hood, I see you. That's the hood translation. I see you. He sees them. He knows them. What do you know about them? I know your tribulation. Let me give you a different word that this Greek word can translate to and help you to understand tribulation. Because you see, Revelation only helps us if you can make a personal application. So let me say it like this. I know your pressure. I know your pressure. Church, Jesus is saying this morning, he knows the pressure you feel. Yeah, he knows the individual details. But have you ever thought about the fact that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, has by supernatural power the ability to feel what you feel? I know. I can relate. I know what it's like to have pressure. The idea of this pressure is a big, heavy rock that is placed on your chest, and you are lying on the ground waiting for the weight of this rock to crush you because it is pressing on you. I know your tribulation. Your pressure. Let's get real for a moment. Would Jesus and his love for you be elevated if you believed that he knew your pressure? That he understands your pressure? See, this Jesus who we're talking about, he is writing to a church that's filled with people that are just overwhelmed, overcome by pressure. Pressure. We've got to get away from this notion that to be a Christian means the good days are ahead. That's not the promise that I read about in Revelation chapter 2 to the church at Smyrna. I know your pressure. Keep reading in verse 9. And your poverty, your beggary. Let's not soften this to think that when he uses the word poverty, he means you're living below the poverty line. No. You have nothing. You are penniless. We're so rich in America, we got pennies somewhere lost in our cars. Underneath the floor mats, you know. If I check a pair of jeans of mine, I might have 3 or 4 pennies in one of the pockets. Yeah, they didn't even have that. They had nothing, so they had nothing to spare. And it caused pressure. You read about the church in Jerusalem, how they shared with one another. And you want to be like that, but you have nothing to share. That's pressure. Worship with your brothers and sisters at common ground, and you want to get your praise on. And you don't have any to spare because of pressure. And spiritually and emotionally, you feel not just down, but down and out. And the word of encouragement for you this morning is the Son of the living God, the one who is first and last, who died but is now alive. He sees you. He knows you. He's right there. He is not far from any of us, the Apostle Paul told the church at Rome. It's a promise. I know your pressure. I know that you are penniless. Let's keep reading in verse 9. But you are rich. I know what you see, and I know what you feel. But I'm here to encourage you because I know what I've given and I know what you have. Did I go too fast? Let me try that again. Jesus wants them to see the reality of the riches that they have because they know him. Now you're going to hopefully understand this, but at some point we're going to get to another church, and this church is poor, but they're actually rich. And this other church, they're going to claim to be rich, but they were actually poor. They were penniless. But Smyrna, the Smyrnanites, sounds like a made-up word that I just made up. They were actually rich. But you got so much pressure, you don't see it or feel it. How am I going to feel rich every time I take my family to the grocery store and they throw rocks at us because I didn't say that Caesar was Lord? Yeah, that makes sense. So I got to write to you. I got to give you some encouragement because there's something that you have that you're not feeling right now. You are actually rich in abundance. Let's keep reading. I also know the slander of those who say that they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Raise your hand if your translation says, for the word slander, it says blasphemy. Anybody have blasphemy? Yeah. Let me say it like this. I know the character assassination. Does that communicate? They're talking about you behind your back, in front of your face, to your friends, to your family. They put it on the wire. They let all of social media know. They put you on blast. I know. I know what they're doing. Now, these are Jews that preferred that Caesar would have favor with them over Jesus. That's why Jesus says, yeah, they're Jews, but no. Because the Jews that would at least follow Yahweh, they would at least acknowledge that God, Yahweh, is Lord. They're ethnic, they're racially Jewish, but they're claiming that Caesar is Lord. They're not even Jews. Yeah, when they worship in the synagogue, they're literally following the enemy of God. And they're the ones that are slandering you. Isn't it funny how even somebody who would assassinate your character, but they're really not qualified, they don't have the authority or the credibility to do so, and yet it doesn't take away the hurt? Have you noticed that? I've noticed that. Because in the age of the internet, everybody is an expert on everything, right? So it's amazing how many folk will get on social media and critique you, and they've never done that ever, have no experience, right? I talk to worship pastors all the time who get negative critiques from people who got their training from watching YouTube videos. It's not good, but it doesn't take away the pressure, the feeling of emptiness, the hurt. And Jesus says, I know you. Verse 10 is bookend with two words that are the bulk of my message for today. I want you to listen to them from the perspective that it is Jesus who knows you that is the one giving this message. If you're with me there, then listen to the Master say, do not fear. Do not fear. To the church in Smyrna, that on the daily they are accused and abused and robbed of dignity just because they follow Jesus. Jesus, the one who went through that, tells them, don't fear. What credibility do you have? I died and I was raised from the dead. That's my credibility. I was there on that side. So you got to hear me when I say boldly what I'm saying, because I'm standing on the other side. I'm standing on the side of Resurrection Mountain. Do not fear. I want you to never fear, ever. Got some problems with this verse. Because we think, well, I'm not going to throw everybody on the bus. Some of you who are like me think that the opposite of fear is courage. See, for Jesus, the opposite of fear is not courage. The opposite of fear is faith. Revelation chapter 1, in the first chapter. Revelation chapter 1. Let me show you something. In the first chapter, starting at verse 17, when I, John, saw him, Jesus, I fell at his feet as though dead, but he laid his right hand on me, saying, fear not, fear not. I am the first and the last, the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forever, and I have the keys to death and Hades. It is the one who died but is now alive that tells John, don't be afraid. And let's keep it on the real. It was kind of frightening to see that vision. And this same Jesus tells the Smyrnites, do not fear. You're in this predicament because of me. So continue to have faith in me, because look at me now. I'm alive. I hold the keys to death and Hades. Go talk to Caesar. Look at his keychain. No keys. Oh, do not fear what you are about to suffer. Now look at the prophetic nature of this. You suffer all the time, but I'm writing you because they're about to kick it into overdrive. Yeah, this is going to be rough. And I want to encourage you, don't fear. The devil is about to throw some of you in prison. Oh, that you may be tested for 10 days. You will have tribulation. You will have pressure. I've read a lot about this 10 days. I'm going to say, based on all the commentators that I have read and the theologians that I've read, I'm going to say that these 10 days means 10 days. It's a day and 10 of them, all right? If you want to get the other stuff, hit internet and you can get it. But this is the point. The point ain't the 10. The point is it's going to be limited. It's just going to be for a little while. But it's going to be intense. Don't fear. Don't fear. And this is how he bookends it. Be faithful unto death. Be faithful unto death. In other words, for the rest of your life, stick with me. I see you. I got you. The proof is I'm alive. I rose from the dead. I got you. Stick with me. Stick with me. And he says, I've got a crown of a life for you. Two kinds of possible crowns. You know, there's the crown that kings and queens wear. That's the crown of royalty. It's a different word in the Greek. This word is like, you got to think, see if anybody catches this. Da, 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 da. Anybody with me? Oh, thank you. For a moment, I felt really old right there. In the Olympics, at the end of the race or the event, you'd get this wreath. It was the prize. It was the crown. Jesus says, stick with me, and I've got an eternal prize for you. Oh, my goodness. What a blessing. What a joy. And what's even more so a joy is when you stick with Jesus and you find out that being with him forever is the prize. This section ends with the one who conquers, verse 11. The one who conquers. Well, if you have ears, then hear what I'm saying to the churches. Notice how he writes to Smyrna, to the angel of Smyrna. But then in verse 11, it says, hear what the Spirit says to the churches, plural. You see, he writes this specifically to them, knowing that they're going to share it. And this blessing in this letter is going to be a blessing for them too. To the churches, the one who conquers will not be hurt by the second death. That word hurt means unjustly wronged. You see, if you stick with me, if you hear what I'm saying, and you put it into practice, you internalize it, and you make the internalization of what I'm saying to be experiential in your life on the daily, then there will never be a death that you will experience that I will allow. And that death be given to you because of unjustly being accused, pressure, being in a beggary state of mind and body and life, of having your name scandalized by folk who have no business having your name come out of their mouth. I will not allow the second death to do wrong to you, to do harm to you. For you, the second death is crossing the tape to get the reward. To get the reward. All right, we end today with this. Take your fear and exchange it for faith in Jesus. Take your fear. I'm talking to the church now. I'm talking to believers in Jesus Christ. Take your fear, and by the power of the Spirit of God, keep exchanging it for faith. Faith in the one who knows your works, who sees you, who feels you. We're not going to sugarcoat the fear. The fear is based on the pressure and the poverty and the slander. But I can exchange the fear for faith because I'm actually rich. In abundance. It's the reason why Jesus died to begin with. It is the reason why he came to this earth to begin with. He came to give us life in abundance. John chapter 16. John chapter 16. The final verse that I will read to you this morning. John 16. Verse 33, John writes the words of Jesus coming out of an extended period of time with his disciples, wanting to comfort him as his eyes are fixed on Calvary. Jesus tells them, I have said these things to you that in me you may have peace. In the world, you will have pressure. It's the exact same word in Greek as it is in Revelation chapter 2. In this world, you will have tribulation, pressure. But take heart, Lift your hearts, lift your mind, lift your emotions, lift your spirit, lift your head up. Why? I have overcome the world. So stick with me. I have overcome the world. Stick with me. Have faith in me. Believe in me. I died and I rose. I got some resurrection power to share with you. I have overcome the world. Take your pressure and your poverty and that slander. Turn it in for the riches that I provide. Have faith in me.